Noah and her guitarist. If you are, please.
Hello. We are
Hi,
here.
you are there. Okay,
Hi.
Beseder.
Yes,
As long
yes.
as you are there, I call Beseder. So this is fine. Everybody that we need in place is in place. Welcome, Ari, our very special sponsor today, and let us get the show rolling for today. So here is our man for this evening, this program, and next week as well, by the way. We are continuing to read your poetry next week as well. The book for English speakers that you can find a lot, not everything, of course. Sami Chetrit's poetry is a book called Jews, and it is available in English. And this is why I'm showing you the cover right now, so that you can look it up if you want to. Our sponsor tonight of both my session and our speaker is Ari Katz, and I will invite you in a minute to address us, because this is yet another event of the work that Ari and I have been doing together for quite a long time now. So I'd like to hear from you, and with a special request that I will address to you. We have our musician, Noah Ben Shushan, and the guitarist that comes with her. And the music is sponsored tonight by our participant, Deborah Hollenberg, who is sponsoring more than one musician, but this is one of them. Thank you, Deborah, for your very, very generous gift towards the musicians project. Ari, a couple of days ago, a week ago, I mentioned the t-shirts for the 4 great poets of the Tuesday programs. So why don't you unmute yourself for a minute, address us, allow us to properly thank you for your generous gift, and tell us about the t-shirts, because everybody wants to know.
Thank you. Well, thank you for thanking me, but please thank CSP, because CSP is underwriting. I'm the founder of the Community Scholar Program. I will put in chat a link to CSP, but we've been bringing some of the best Jewish thinkers and writers and poets and so on in the world to Orange County, California, now the world, online. So we invite everybody to join CSP. We have a CSP online t-shirt store, and we put creative t-shirts in there based on who our speakers have been. Rachel Korazim is one of our favorite teachers. And so Rachel and I created a t-shirt featuring 4 of her favorite poets that she's been lecturing about. So you can get the t-shirt.
Alterman, Leah Goldberg, and Amichai.
Correct. And Sami, do not worry. We'll work on a t-shirt for you after this program. I just need a picture that we can use. So I just wanted to thank you for including us. It's a pleasure for us we've been hosting events ever since you started this online poetry session. We have many of our CSP people on from around the country and around the world. So I wanted to thank them for supporting us and you. I wanted to mention we're going on a Jewish tour of Dublin virtually coming up, and tying into your musician, we've hosted Noah Ben Shoshan because of you at one of our live from Salon Mendoza events, and we're having another one coming up in March, right? The Sunday before Purim. So we'll be featuring Asaf Rabbi and more musicians. I will share that with everybody. And again, thank you. Looking forward to today's program.
Toda Rabba Rabba Ari for who you are and what you do for this long time, bringing Israeli and Jewish culture to first Orange County, but now literally worldwide. Aren't we privileged to be part of that? And so let me put the screen back so that we can start. And Sami, here is the surprise. When I got Noah's repertoire for tonight, today for the others, I saw on it Shalom al Tizachen, which I could not find in my collections of your poetry and books. So I quickly asked Noah to send it to me. And I did a translation, not as good as your official translations. And we are not really studying this poem in depth, but I want people to know about it. So Al Tizachen is Yiddish for old stuff. People who come and purchase old stuff in neighborhoods, etc., are yelling, Al Tizachen. That's in Yiddish. And if you want to get into the world of Sami Chetrit, this is an amazing entry, because he is all about also languages and affinity to languages. So just listen to my course translation. Shalom al Tizachen, an arrow from Gaza on the loudspeaker out of a Palestinian truck into the ears of Moroccan women in Ashdod yards. Intezachen, intezachen, in a Palestinian Yiddish. He adds detail just to be on the safe side. Cupboard, bed, table, oven, refrigerator, to buy, to buy. When I was a child, my mother would send me, Bnini, shufi ladajalan tizachen, Yabalia hadi, downstairs, lamayuba. I'm sorry, I cannot do this better in Moroccan Arabic. Go, son, see if the Altazachen is passing by. Let him take away this terrible word. I would run after him, reaching him, breathing hard. Shalom Altazachen. Sami, why don't we invite Noah to sing Shalom Altazachen for us, and then I will invite you to address it. Noah, take it away.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. We'll do the song Shalom Altazachen. ערבי מעזה קורא ברמקול מתוך משאית פלסטינית אל אוזני הנשים המרוקניות בחצרות אשדוד אינתיזאחים ביידיש פלסטינית ומפרט ליתר ביטחון ארון, מיטה, שולחן, תנור מקרר, לקנות אם תיזכן וילדותי הייתה אמי שולחת אותי שופי לדז לנתיזכין יעבי עליה هادي المثال מעיובה אני הייתי רץ אחריו משיג אותו מתנשף ארון, מיטה, שולחן, תנור, מקרר, לקנות.
תודה רבה.
Thank you.
Noah, this was so beautiful. Thank you. Sami, I'm not saying a word. It's over to you. What is this poem to you? And follow right ahead into also introducing yourself. Bevakasha, Sami.
Well, thank you, Noah. It's beautiful. It's a nice surprise. Very, very nice. You introduced me most of it before we started, but just to add, I started by saying I live in Sderot, but I am an Ashdodian, as we say, Ashdodi. I grew up in Ashdod. Ashdod was where my children grew up. So it's been the hometown from the moment we landed in Israel in 1963, when I was just a little bit older than 3 years old. So this is the place I remember. But I am now in Sderot, a little bit south to Ashdod. It's about like, I would say 1,000 meters from the Gaza fence. I'm not saying border because it's not an official border. And this place knew really different days, this area. I teach at Sapir College, the School of Audio in visual arts, in one word, film school. And I'm also the head of the school. And we do exciting stuff, very young and talented young women and men making films, telling stories in many different ways. And I love my job. I've been here for 6 years. Before that, I was in New York. I won't go back further, but just to tell you, I was in New York teaching at Queens College and also the Graduate Center of City University of New York. And now I'm here, and this is my life around that work. It's very demanding, challenging, but all good. Good demands, good challenges, I call it every day. So that poem to begin with is really telling the story, a different story of this area. When I grew up in Ashdod, well, I thought Alte Zachen is an Arabic word. I didn't know what it is, but I didn't hear Alte. Even if I heard Alte, we didn't have any Ashkenazi Jews in Ashdod. Very few, very few. It was mostly those days North African Jews and Jews from other places like Iran and India and some other places. So I heard Inti. Inti is in Arabic, you for female. So Inti, Zachen, I didn't know what they're saying. So it took me a long time until I heard of the origins of Alte Zachen, and the picture you were showing, very nice and old. So those were the days when actually people from Gaza came not only to buy old stuff, but also to sell their stuff in the market of Ashdod. As children, my parents took us to Gaza to buy different things. People in Sderot can tell stories when they went back and forth to Gaza. Even all the old days, there were some students from Gaza at the college I'm teaching. So today it's really some kind of wild imagination to even think about that. And that's the life over here. So that poem, I don't know how old is that poem. I don't know. It's not dated, maybe 1985 or 6 or something.
Sami, I'd like to suggest something, and I hope you are willing to go with me on this invitation. So normally when I structure my sessions, I decide what I will do in the first session, then what I will do in the second session. But we have you for one session. So I prepared all the poems today, and I'm inviting you to choose which ones you want to address. And we will see how many we can do depending on the conversation. Let me do just one suggestion. I will show you the two groupings, but you can go wherever. And we also have more songs by Noah. My reading of your poetry was like doing a group of poems that relate to the immigrant experience, to the Moroccan experience in Ashdod, to the language, to the names. That was one group. And the other one that spoke to my heart as well is where you express, how shall I put it politely without people accusing us of doing politics? Your ideology as per war, as per the Jewish-Palestinian ongoing wars, etc. So I grouped the poems accordingly, but you are really free. So let me show you so that you remember. First of all, I love the way you speak about this particular language culture of Ashdod, calling it Ashdodit, Ashdodian. And I put two pictures, one of Ashdod today and one of Ashdod probably around the time that your family may have arrived. I looked at the Wikipedia, I figured out the dates, and I was looking for a picture. So on the left-hand side, maybe Ashdod of your childhood. On the right-hand side, a bit of Ashdod of today. And on it, I put the poems for one of my selections and there'll be another. So just take notes or choose or whatever. I got a move Jew, Grandpa Yihye. These are the names. On the way to En Harod, More Than Voices, Getting to Know Friendly American Jewish Woman. This is one choice. And let me tell you, because we don't have just surprises, that if you choose these are the names, we have a song for you. And if you choose More Than Voices, we have another song for you. So you want to start choosing from here, or you want to see both collections?
No, actually, I have that.
So where shall I go? Which four?
Chose. I'll read in Hebrew, of course.
Yeah, of course, but just tell me which one.
Well, I'll start with these are the names.
So give me a minute. Give me a
Saba
minute.
Yihya, Grandpa Yihya.
Rega. You're starting with Grandpa Yihya?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Here it is on the screen. You can read from the screen as well. Go ahead, Sami.
It's not the right one. Now it is, yeah. It took some time.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll read from the screen. It's convenient. Saba Yihya. Saba shili Yehiel, קראו אותו יחיה. מרחק בינינו כך וכך שנות לימוד בארץ ישראל, כך וכך שנות אבק על סידור התפילה, כמה וכמה פיוטים, כך וכך זמירות נשכחות. דדה שלי, יחיה, חי ומת בארץ המגרב, כך וכך שעות טיסה מארץ ישראל. פעמים אפגוש בו בירושלים, ג'לבה לבנה, ברה שחור, ידיו שלובות לאחור, חולף אותי, בתום לב, אינו מכיר בדמותו. עוד בילדותי, בליל ההגדה, כשהייתה אמי קמה לפתוח דלתה, לכבוד אליהו שיבוא, הייתי אני מייחל לו, לסבא שלי, יחיה.
תודה רבה. Thank you, Sami, for this reading. Let us read the poem in English. Stuart, can you read it for us from the screen? Is that good?
Yes, that's fine. I have the text in front of me.
That's good.
Grandpa Yihya. My grandpa Yehiel, they called him Yihya. The distance between us is so and so. School years in the land of Israel, so and so dust years on the prayer book, so and so psalms, so and so forgotten hymns. My dada Yihya lived and died in the Maghreb, so and so hours of flight from the land of Israel. At times I run into him in Jerusalem, white jalaba, black beret, hands crossed behind his back, passing me by innocently, not recognizing his image in me. Even as a child on the night of the Seder, when my mother would rise to open the door in honor of Eliyahu, that he may come, I would wish for him, for my grandpa, Yihya.
Thank you, Stuart, for, as usual, a wonderful reading. Sami, what is important for you for us to notice in this poem? What is important for you for us to take away from this poem? I will put it back on the screen so people can see it properly. Yeah.
Yes. Well, this is also an early poem, very early, like early 80s, I would say. And this is really my very private longing for my grandfather, which I don't remember him. He died when I was 2 years old. But they said he loved me. They tell me funny stories about him and me. And so in the early 80s, I studied in Jerusalem. For the entire 80s, I lived in Jerusalem, where I got married, with my firstborn was born. And I love to travel in the old city of Jerusalem. It wasn't as tense as today. And so the poem really came, some spark, some image that, that brings about the whole poem. I don't even remember how I write any of this, but actually looking at this old man with a beard, with some kind of a jalaba also, and I thought I saw my grand, like his ghost, or just I followed him for a while just to look at him with the beard. My grandpa.
You mean now on the screen?
Hmm?
You mean
What?
back in Jerusalem?
Yeah, I'm talking early 80s. So that was really a spark, and then I was thinking about how far really we will be now if I met him then. I mean, in the 80s. Well, he was an Orthodox Jew, observant. The way Moroccans observe, of course, it's different. And I stopped praying for a long time then. And I lost it all, so I was wondering, if we met, what will be the language, what will be the common spiritual or cultural ground that we can communicate. So because I don't want to go into all of that, but of course we went very far from my grandpa, myself, my whole generation, not only myself. And it's a longing for something that will never be. I go to Morocco, I visit all the time. I was there just 2 months ago, but it's not the same. It's different. It's a different connection.
So the distance can be measured in years of studying, in the amount of dust on the prayer book.
Well, I have to say my family, to say my family pretty much was observant, I grew up in, like, you can say, like Masorti kind of home. So the Sidur Tfilah, the prayer book, was not really foreign to me. I mean, we went to synagogue here and there on Shabbat and the holidays, but, it was very far. The interesting thing today, I think today I would write a different poem if this will come up, because everything is coming back. The young generation, like Noah Ben Shoshan and many others, they go back to those materials, to those traditions, to so much piyutim groups, in Israel, and the music is being revived. It's amazing what's going on today, but not in my generation. That generation was really...
So let us take you to another poem that you suggested, and that is about the names, right?
Yeah.
And Noah, I would like to just put you on alert for that one, because one of your songs is coming immediately after that. Sami, read us the poem in Ivrit, although it's a little bit Ivrit and French. Go ahead.
There's everything in it. So you'll hear the sounds of the street of my childhood in Ashdod.
We want to.
והיו לנו שמות עם ריח חוץ לארץ. עלה, via la maison, vite, ז'קי, תלת דרד, ריח. והיה בבר עם גופה משולשת, ופטריק, וז'וז'ו, ודדה. לבנות היו שמות פעמונים, בריז'ית, אליס, מישל, ז'וז'ט ואנט. והמורה רשמה לנו ביומן שמותינו עבריים, אילן, יעקב, אברהם, דוד ועליזה, זהבה וחנה. יעני באה להגיד לנו, ידענו, אבל התעקשנו עוד קצת נחוע חוץ לארץ. לפני שידום צלצול הפעמונים, סמי, מימי, רשל, מרדושה.
I will take the reading in English because there is French in it as well, which I can do. And we had names with overseas centrechus laris. Allez, venez à la maison vite, Jackie, l'aldar, yala. And there was Beber with a triangle bud, and Patrick, and Jojo, and Dede. The girls' names like bells, Brigitte, Alice, Michelle, Georgette, and Annette. And the teacher wrote for us in her roster our names in Hebrew: Ilan, Yaakov, Abraham, David, Aliza, Zehava, and Hannah, whatever. She thought she was going to tell us. We knew. But we insisted on a bit more of an overseas scent before the ringing of the bells is silenced. Sami, Mimi, Rachel, Mardoché. Before I ask you to speak about that, let us invite Noah to sing for us Algérie by Roni Somek in French. Noah, please take it from here.
All right. Si j'avais encore une fille, je l'appellerais Algérie. Si j'avais encore une fille, je l'appellerai Algérie. Et vous ôteriez devant moi vos chapeaux coloniaux en m'appelant Abou Algérie. Le matin quand elle ouvrirait ses yeux de chocolat, je dirais l'Afrique. Voilà, l'Afrique se réveille et elle caresserait le blanc sur la tête de sa sœur, sûr d'avoir découvert l'eau. Algérie, viens voir comment je peins le mur à l'est au pinceau du soleil. Algérie, viens voir comment je peins le mur à l'est au pinceau du soleil. Algérie, viens voir comment je peins le mur à l'est au pinceau du soleil. Si j'avais encore une fille, je l'appellerai Algérie. Je l'appellerai Algérie. Algérie, viens voir. Algérie, viens voir. Algérie, viens voir. Algérie.
Toda rabba rabba, dear
Thank you.
Noah. Thank you so much. Sami, will you talk to us about this issue with the names? I'm going to put your poem back on the screen, and please speak to us about names, will you?
Well, names is, you know, we call things names to control. So we keep our name, we have self-control. And we lost our names. I can say we lost our names in the teacher's roster, but I didn't, because I had a different story, you know, just a little story here. Well, we came to Israel, I was almost 4 years old. So first time I go to first grade, I didn't have problems in preschool, kindergarten rather. But first grade, the teacher welcomes us, of course, and we a bunch of new immigrants from North Africa, most of us. And she's reading our names and changing them. I mean, she thinks she's Hebraizing them. How do you say that? To make them into Hebrew. So while she's reading, she's doing it on the spot. And I got very anxious because my name, Chetrit, is in Shin, will come almost the last on the roster. So I see how she changes all the names. You know, Jojo becomes Yosef, Dede became David, and nobody protests. They just say yes, and she goes on, and I'm really anxious and nervous. And then she gets to me and says, "Oh, Sami, Sami is not a Hebrew name. Your name from today will be Shmuel." So I didn't say anything, but I burst into crying. And I was crying, and she came and she comforted me, and I couldn't stop crying because, you know, today, if I think about it, I felt like someone is taking my whole personality. So I went to my father and I said, the teacher changed my name. And she said, no way, he came. The next day he went to school with me and he gave her a little lecture about my name, which should be really Sami, but it's also Sami, could be, you know, it's a cosmopolitan name, but it's Sami. In Arabic, Sami is from the root Sama, and Sama is higher, superior, etc., etc. And he said to her, please don't change my son's name ever. So he had to come back and do the same lecture every year to the, what you call in the States, the homeroom teacher, we call it mechanechet. She goes with you all the day. Until I learned to defend myself. And so that's how I kept my name. I have my middle name in Hebrew that's under my grandfather, Shaleom. So whoever wants to use Hebrew is welcome to call me Shalom. That's when they call you up to the Torah, so they can use Shalom. So that's a little story that really tells the story, because all those names are real names of people I know, and they're all being changed. They don't use their names anymore until this very day. So it's a little story. So I don't want to make things too long, but I've written so much about identity and how much your name, your surname, your family name, and not losing it. Is the one only thing I told my children, you know, you can change your first name as many times as you want, but your last name is not yours. It's not yours. It's been just lended to you, and you're gonna pass it further to your children, and that's it. You're just gonna use it and pass it down. And I mean it, really. This is, I just can think about how long this name was kept in the family. We go back hundreds of years in Morocco.
Sami, I want to ask about one line in the poem that is actually reiterated. In the first verse, the first stanza, when you, the line that goes, the girls had names like bells, labanot hayu shmot pa'amonim. And then just, again, 3 lines from the bottom in the last verse, you go, before the ringing of bells is silenced. In your memory, in your imagination, these French, Moroccan names ring like bells. And you don't want to lose the ringing of the bells, because the Hebrew doesn't sound like bells, because no, they do not.
Hebrew sounded always like some kind of machine with big hammers. to me. The names, too clumsy also. So Brigitte, Alice, Michel, Sami,
They're soft, they're bells.
It was very, very Jojo. It was, and still, it's like we kept something in our territory because we went to school. School had nothing to do. The textbook and the school, the classroom, had nothing to do with our traditions, with our culture, with our language, or anything of that. Actually, the school was erasing everything we brought from Morocco. So at least the names.
Go to the road to En Harod for that, maybe?
Yeah. Okay.
Shall we go there, or you want another?
Yeah, we can do that. That's a good line.
Here we go. Let's go straight to En Harod. Here it is on the screen. You do the Ivrit for us.
בדרך לעין חרוד. בדרך לעין חרוד עבדה לי הרש. אחר כבר לא חשתי באובדן העין. ואת החטא החיכית מאבי כך ירשתי, שרכשה בעצמו בדרך לאי, ארץ ישראל. בדרך לעין חרוד עבדה לי העין. לא ממש עבדה, נראה כי בלעתי אותה.
Yeah, there is something that is very hard to translate there. But Stuart, why don't you read us the English as you would read in English, and then we will point out the nuances. Go ahead.
I'll do my best, thank you. On the way to Kibbutz Ein Harod, I lost my trilled resh. Afterwards, I didn't feel the loss of my guttural ayin, and the breathy het. I inherited from my father, who himself picked it up on his way to the land. On the way to Ein Harod, I lost my ayin. I didn't really lose it. Guess I just swallowed it.
Okay, so I mean, this is brilliant, the last line, because what happens—
a nice solution that Amiel Al-Kalai gives to
It's beautiful, and I like to start with that. So, ladies and gentlemen, please look at the last line at the Ibrit. At the end of the second verse, as on the way to En Harod, he loses the ayin, and then you have in the last line in Hebrew, balati. That's not a word in Hebrew. No. That's a distorted word. It misses a letter. And the letter it misses is ayin. It should be balati, I swallowed it. But the Hebrew vernacular does not recognize the ayin. So talk to us about now not names, but sounds that are lost. What happened?
If you hear when I read, I always make sure I'm reading with height. I mean, I cannot actually read differently because this is how we were taught to pray. Even the prayer will sound very strange without the het and the ayin and all those. Well, it's another thing we lost. I think all of us, I'm not saying about only Mizrahim or North Africans. I mean, we all lost the sound, the beautiful sound of sound. I mean, I'm not even saying original because there are so many arguments about that. But there is a het and there is a ayin, and there is a story to it. I mean, my personal story, I don't just write fictional poems. They all come from something I experienced. And this is actually, I was on my way to En Harod. I joined the Garin, Nahal group. We were in En Harod for 8 months before joining the army, and then later establishing a new kibbutz in the Galilee. So I have that in my biography as well, nowhere to hide it. And actually, I noticed this is okay when I many things that happen in the classroom. It's only in perspective of so many years and studies I can talk about them. But this, I was actually witnessing how I'm losing everything on the way, actually in the kibbutz, because that my language that I bring from home, from Ashdod, I mean, my pronunciation did not fit. Nobody told me anything about this, I have to say, but I felt that I have to lose it. I have to lose my resh, my het, my ein. I have to speak like those Mayflower kids of Kibbutz and Harod, which is really, if you want to make an analogy to the Mayflower. And so that's how I started losing everything. And it came back. Everything came back much later. Came back because I was making an effort not to pronounce all those sounds, and it was torture. It was too much, you know. So when I felt free enough amongst different people later, years later, so the resh I know came back. Het, just basically when I read, and the ein is there, you know. My firstborn son, Jonathan, he was, today he's 34, he was 3, so we came back from studying. I studied at Columbia University, and we came back to Israel. So the only person who spoke Hebrew to was me. So he spoke like me with the resh. So I remember when we went to kindergarten, it was very funny, and the teacher asked him, "Are you guys from Argentina or Spain or something?" Because she couldn't make a place to that resh, this rolling resh.
I'd like one more question or note about this particular poem, and that is, I didn't know that you were on Garin and in the Nachal in Harod, like a preparatory unit for the military.
Yeah.
And I was reading the title on the way to Kibbutz and Harod. I was reading in Harod as a metaphor for the whole kibbutz, Mayflower kind of thing. I didn't realize it was a real part of your autobiography, but it
which
can
is good.
be read. Yeah.
It's okay without, yeah.
Okay. Where shall you take us from here? Do we stay with the Ashdod memories more than their voice? Do you want to go more to the anti-war poetry? Where shall we go?
I'm willing to read whatever you feel like. I mean, you're a very good teacher. I mean, you put together a very nice narrative here so far. So wherever you want to go, I'll go.
So why don't we go here? Look at the screen, and Noah, again, I ask you to get ready.
Yeah.
And I'm going to invite you to read Yoter Mikolam.
Yeah.
And then we will have it read in English, and then we will have Noah for you. And we will, of course, either you or I have, or both of us will have to explain who Enrico Macias was in Israel and in our culture. Why don't you read it for us first?
Still is, yeah. יותר מכולם. בילדותי ניגנו רבים, צלילי מערב ושירת ערב. אך יותר מכולם, יותר מכולם, עולה בי נגינת קולו, חודרת עצמות, של הדוד בנימין. שם בסעודות המפוארות שנדר דודי לשנים, לזכר הצדיק רבי דוד בן ברוך, בסלון הקטן, הדחוס לרווחה, שירה ופית וריחות הערק, בצחוקי בדיחות עולים חדשים, דור המדבר. הלכו קולות ילדותי, הלך גם הדוד בנימין, על תקליט חורק, אנריקו מסיאס עודנו שר, עזבתי את מולדתי, עזבתי את ביתי.
Stuart, can you do the English for us? You will have to unmute for that.
Do the English and I'll do the French.
Okay, go ahead.
In my childhood, many played sounds of the Western songs from Arabia. But more than all, more than their voices, rises in me the bone-piercing melody of the voice of Uncle Binyamin. There, in the magnificent feast that my uncle vowed for years in memory of the righteous Rabbi David ben Baruch, in the small living room, comfortably crowded, song and psaltery and song and sense of arak, in the laughter of new immigrant jokes in the desert generation. Gone are the sounds of my childhood. Gone too is Uncle Benjamin. On a screechy old record, Enrico Macias still sings J'ai quitté mon pays. J'ai quitté ma maison. I left my country. I left my home.
Thank you. Hold it, Sami, and let us invite Noah to sing for us J'ai quitté mon pays, j'ai quitté ma maison, and then we'll go into the conversation. Noah, bevakasha. Everybody, please remain muted.
J'ai quitté mon pays, j'ai quitté ma maison, ma vie, ma triste vie se traîne sans raison. J'ai quitté mon soleil, j'ai quitté ma mer bleue, leurs souvenirs se réveillent bien après mon adieu. Soleil, soleil de mon pays perdu, des villes blanches que j'aimais, des filles que j'ai jadis connues. J'ai quitté une amie, je vois encore ses yeux mouillés de pluie, de la pluie de l'adieu. Je revois son sourire si près de mon visage, il faisait resplendir les soirs de mon village. J'ai longtemps regardé ses yeux bleus qui fuyaient, la mer les a noyés dans le flot du regret.
Rabba, Noah. This was
Thank you.
so beautiful. And Sami, I want you to know that reviewing our program today, and I realized the reference to Enrico Macias, I contacted Noah maybe 3 or 4 hours ago.
Yeah.
And I said, can you add Macias to the program? I said, what can happen? Maximum, she will say no, you know? And she said, yes, but only a cappella, because she hadn't rehearsed it with Oded. So really special thanks, Noah, for being flexible, for agreeing, for doing it. And now, avec plaisir.
Yes, because it's the sound of my childhood. So for me, Enrico Macias, it's also what I heard at home. So with pleasure. Thank you.
So Sami, talk to us about the place of Enrico Macias in your world, in all our culture, as a matter of fact. Even Ashkenazim enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, Noah. It was beautiful. Really beautiful. What can I say? You know, Enrico Macias, although, as we say, not Moroccan, he's Algerian, but for us, he's the voice of the immigration from North Africa. And really, since he moved to France, very young, I think he was 18, most of his years he's singing about longing to the homeland, about being detached, not being French for the the Algerian and Algerian to the French and Jewish to the Gentiles and etc. So he sings. He has other songs. He sings about those, and his lyrics are really moving. We came from Morocco with his record, his first record, live in Olympia, 1960. He was, I think, 20 years old. And so it was, we came from, I mean, my father brought a record player. We came in 63, the end of 63, so we didn't go through the whole Ma'abara and all that. So my parents had time to organize a little bit before coming. So this is really a record that played and played and played and played for years and years and years. And of course, Enrico Macias came many times to Israel and to Ashdod, many times to Ashdod. Ashdod was like a hometown for him.
Let's look back again at the poem, will you, with us? Because there is, again, a line that I enjoyed so much, and I want to draw everybody's attention to it, because it's one of those things that are a little bit lost in translation, and we deserve to look at it. So I will let you, of course, talk about anything you wish about the poem, but let us go to, I'm going to the Ivrit and then back to the English. In the second verse, Ach yoter mikulam, yoter mikolam. And the English goes, but more than all, more than their voice. But in Hebrew, the sound is similar. Kulam, all of them, kolam, their voice. And that is a little bit lost in translation. And my reading of it is really the ability to retain the sounds that stand for all of them. And it takes us back to Georgette and the other names. It's also the sounds. And it takes us back to the ayin and the chet and the resh. It's also the sounds. Is your memory more of sounds than of visual things? Is that what you're saying, that sounds are retained better?
I think so, because I think sounds, well, I always have this sounds some kind of playing in the background of my head, especially the women singing, not only Uncle Benjamin, who was a cantor at our synagogue, but also singing in all family occasions. And his voice was really strong. I mean, I don't even have to make an effort to play his voice in my head. And the women singing is always in my head. It's especially the voices, the sounds that move me, that really, I think, brought me into doing art, writing poetry. It's the sound. Everything starts for me in some kind of a sound or rhythm in my head before I even think about words. I don't know if I have many poems that starts with an image, but it will be a sound, or it will be a word, or it will be a phrase that will just bounce back and forth in my head. Sometimes for weeks and sometimes even longer, until it will come out somehow. And that I don't know how it becomes to this kind of poem. This is also I wrote when I was maybe 24 years old, or maybe 6, I don't know. Or no, maybe later, 90, 91, something like that. So it's like 30 something years ago, and it's hard to remember the process, how this poem came about to be. But the sounds I can remember, of course, I can remember. Just last weekend, I was playing an old video of my Uncle Benjamin. This is a coincidence, this is amazing, to my mother. She's 82, God bless her. And he just opened his mouth on the video, of course, and she started crying. Immediately, she started crying because just his voice for her really brings everything back, everything. And back for her is going all the way to Morocco, to where we came from.
Sami, shall we go to America and share a little bit of your experience while in Queens?
Depends what poem. I think all these poems are before the
Yeah,
Queens.
this poem, שיחת היכרות עם יהודייה אמריקאית חביבה.
Yeah.
Are we going to do it? Are we going to be afraid to insult maybe some of our friends? We don't want, no, we don't want to insult them. So why don't you read the Ivrit, and then I will ask maybe if we have a woman reader. Jen, are you good to read today?
Yeah, but I think this usually when we read this, okay, we can read it together.
I was going to suggest that. I will do the woman, okay?
Yeah.
If you allow me.
So just one second. Yeah. Tell me when you start.
You have to start. No, I have to start.
Yeah.
I have to start.
Yeah.
תאמר לי, אתה מישראל?
כן, אני משם.
והיכן אתה גר בישראל?
ירושלים, בשנים האחרונות אני מתגורר שם.
עיר נפלאה, ג'רוזלם.
כן, אכן נפלאה.
ואתה מהחלק המערבי או מהצד המזרחי?
זו שאלה קשה. תלוי מי מצייר את המפה.
אתה מצחיק, אתה מדבר עברית?
כן, ודאי.
כלומר, זו שפת האם שלך?
לא בדיוק, שפת אמי הערבית, אבל היום היא מדברת עברית שוטפת.
זה יופי, למדתי את זה בקיבוץ.
לא רע בכלל.
כלומר, אתה ישראלי, כן?
כן, ודאי.
ממשפחה מסורתית?
כן, די מסורתית.
שומר שבת?
אני לא, תלוי בעצם...
אתה אוכל חזיר?
לא, זה לא.
תסלח לי על השאלה הסקרנית, אני פשוט חייבת לשאול, אתה יהודי או ערבי?
אני יהודי ערבי.
אתה מצחיק.
לא, אני דווקא רציני.
יהודי ערבי, את זה אף פעם לא שמעתי.
זה פשוט, כמו שאת אומרת, יהודי אמריקני. הנה, נסי להגיד יהודי אירופה.
יהודי אירופה.
עכשיו, אמרי יהודי ערב.
אין בכלל מה להשוות, יהודי אירופה זה משהו אחר.
למה?
כי יהודי לא הולך עם ערבי, פשוט לא הולך. זה אפילו לא מצטלצל טוב באוזניים.
תלוי באמת בטיב האוזניים.
תראה, אין לי שום דבר נגד ערבים. יש לי אפילו פרנץ ידידים ערבים. אבל איך אפשר לומר יהודי ערבי, כאשר כל מה שרוצה הערבי זה לחסל את היהודי?
ואיך אפשר לומר יהודי אירופאי, כאשר כבר חיסל האירופאי את היהודי?
תודה רבה. Friends, I wonder if there are two readers who are willing to do...
Actress, beautiful.
Beautiful.
What she did, beautiful.
Yes. And now, חברים, I'm looking for two readers in English.
I can be one. It's Jan.
Jan is going to be one. I am going to ask Deborah to be the other. Okay? So I'm putting it on the screen for you. And now the one who is doing the guide Israeli has to do an Israeli accent in English.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Okay, go ahead.
Tell me, you're from Israel?
Yeah, yes, I'm from there.
Oh, and where in Israel do you live?
Jerusalem. From the last few years, I've lived there.
Oh, Jerusalem is such a beautiful city.
Yes, yes, of course, a beautiful city.
And you're from west or east?
That's a tough question. Depends on who's drawing the map.
You're funny. And do you I mean, do you speak Hebrew?
Yes, of course.
I mean, that's your mother tongue?
Not really. My mother's tongue is Arabic, but now she speaks Hebrew fine.
Oh, ze yofi. I learned that in the kibbutz.
Not bad at all.
And you're Israeli, right?
Yes, of course.
Your family is observant?
Pretty much.
Do they keep the Sabbath?
Me, no. Depends, actually.
Do you eat pork?
No. No.
Excuse me for prying, but I just have to ask you, are you Jewish or Arab?
I'm an Arab Jew.
You're funny.
No, I'm quite serious.
Arab Jew? I've never heard of that.
It's simple. Just the way you say you're an American Jew, here, try to say European Jews.
European Jews.
Now say Arab Jews.
You can't compare. European Jews is something else.
How come?
Because Jew just doesn't go with Arab. It just doesn't go. It doesn't even sound right.
Depends on your ear.
Look, I've got nothing against Arabs. I even have friends who are Arabs. But how can you say Arab Jew when all the Arabs want is to destroy the Jews?
And how can you say European Jew when the Europeans have already destroyed the Jews?
Toda rabba rabba, friends, for this beautiful reading and for going along. Sami, what happened to you in America that this text was written? I am really curious.
This was really as we say, my first tour in America when I went to study. This is not from Queens. This is when we went to Columbia University in the 1990 or 91. It was during the Gulf War, if you remember, the first Gulf War.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is not really an actual meeting with someone, but really I built this poem from many meetings when I sense not only a woman. This is nice to have a woman, but people trying to really listen and guess you were, look like a nice guy, but is he Jewish or Arab? Should I continue with this conversation or what? And so I think, I don't know when exactly I wrote this, but I think I wrote a few lines and it just went all the way. I had the end of it in mind for a long time, like the punchline or whatever you call that. For a long time, because we came to a country, we came as Arabs, Arab Jews. In our culture, we were Arab. We looked like Arabs, we ate like Arabs, we sang like Arabs, we spoke like Arabs. It must be,
You must be Arabs.
Not Arabs. And so we came to a country where the Arab is the enemy. And basically you look like the enemy. And then, and this is a long process of where you're trying to really overcome that. And the way to overcome that is to develop some kind of, to distance yourself from Arabness, from Arabs, physically Arabs, from Arabic, from anything to do with that, but you can't really that much, in success. And so you actually trying very hard, while I was reading always stories about European Jews going back to Europe. even to Berlin, even to, I'm talking about early years, I'm talking about 70s, 80s, I'm not, people going back to a place where really, as they taught us in school, it was the land of the enemy, of the Jews. You know, Central Europe, for me, you know, going to elementary school with my teacher, Israela, she was a Holocaust survivor, a child Holocaust survivor, and she taught us Europe is the land of our enemy. So I was confused because later I found out the enemy looks like me, really, not like the European. So this was very confusing. And whenever someone tried to guess if I'm Jewish or Arab, that was my answer. It was easy. And, you know, go figure, I'm an Arab Jew, and you go and study and figure.
And figure it out for yourself. So, Sami, I have a suggestion. We are reaching the time of the official ending of our session.
Yeah.
And our minhag here is to stay after the end for conversation. If you have an extra 15, 20 minutes to stay with us and respond to questions, then I'm going to ask Noah to conclude the official part of the class with the last song she prepared. It's a Zohar Argov song, also a very interesting voice if you want to talk about voices. And I will, since it's not part of the texts that I gave you, I'm going to show you the text before I invite Noah to sing it. Zohar Argov, as you can see from the years, died at a relative young age, unfortunately, because of overuse of drugs. He was an amazing voice and an amazing part of the, am I saying it right, Sami, the birth, the revival, the renaissance of Mizrahi culture in Israel? Would that be a good?
Well, he really ignited this whole wave of, I should say, Mizrahi is really the right term to use, because it's not. If something was born in Israel, he mixed everything. So in one song you can hear so many different mawals, we call it. Could be Egyptian, could be Moroccan, could be Yemenite. So he brought everything together, which is in a most beautiful and amazing way. His voice was like a musical instrument, and he played with it so beautifully. And because he really brought it to the front, to primetime TV, first time singing, daring to sing like that, and the rest is history. Yeah.
Okay, let us look at some of the texts also translated by me, no artistic translation, just so that you know what Noah mixing exactly as you suggested in the true spirit of Zohar Argov. Al nevakesh hakol ladat, let us not ask to know it all. Let us not ask to know it all. Let us not be curious about tomorrow. Sometimes the reason is not known. Sometimes the thing is hidden. They are hidden things. We will not know nor understand. We will do things that do not seem to make sense. You do not need to ask and look into everything. It is permitted to sometimes not know it all. Noah, will you take it away together with Oded and sing us this concluding song of yours? Please don't forget to unmute so that we can enjoy it together. Everybody, please remain on mute.
Okay, we are unmuted too.
Okay, now you're not.
Ne cherche pas à tout savoir. Ne sois pas curieux pour demain. Il y a parfois une raison inconnue. Il y a parfois même des choses cachées. Il y a des faits cachés. nul ne comprend ni ne sait. On peut même agir sans réfléchir. Inutile de chercher la cause, ni demander pourquoi. On a le droit de ne pas savoir. I'll never catch הכל לדעת. אל נסתקרן לגבי המחר. יש לפעמים שסיבה לא נודעת. יש לפעמים שנסתר הדבר. יש דברים נסתרים, לא נבין, לא נדע. נעשה גם דברים שנראים בלי סיבה. לא צריך כל דבר לחקור ולשאול. לפעמים גם מותר לא לדעת הכל. Il y a sûrement des choses qu'on a fait. Il y en a sûrement, sûrement beaucoup. Mais si malgré tout la cause reste inconnue, garde l'espoir d'avoir la réponse un jour. Il y a des faits cachés, nul ne comprend ni ne sait. On peut même agir sans réfléchir. Inutile de chercher la cause, ni demander pourquoi. On a le droit de ne pas savoir.
תודה רבה, רבה, רבה.
תודה רבה, נועה.
תודה רבה לכם.
To both of you, this was so beautiful, Noah and Oded. Ladies and gentlemen, you know our minhag. Some people can stay until the 15 minutes after the hour. You notice that I do not mention the hour because these are different hours wherever you are in the world. And they have to leave at this point. So if that is the case, we will bid you a wonderful rest of the day and Shabbat Shalom. And we who are staying, Ari, can you stay on with us, or shall I again properly thank you because you have to leave?
I have to run to a quick meeting, but I very much
I thought
enjoyed
so,
this
and
program.
this is why I asked. So toda rabah from both Sami and myself for offering us this amazing program today, and we will continue talking as we always do. And Shabbat Shalom to you as well. I figured that you may have your program full, knowing your life.
Shabbat Shalom, and don't forget that we're hoping to bring a group to Israel for an arts trip, and maybe we'll be in your house in May, and maybe we'll invite Sami to come hang out with us.
You know what? It's a wonderful idea.
Okay.
So let us talk about that.
Okay.
Let us talk about that. And ladies and gentlemen, Ed, I am ready. Toda rabah, Noah and Oded. Shabbat Shalom to you. Wonderful. Your ability and generosity with your time and talent today to fit into the poetry of Sami. And at this point, Sami, I'm not thanking you yet because you promised to remain for a little bit, and you can start seeing the raised hands. And we have our participant, Ed Grossman from Washington, D.C., who normally helps run this part of the conversation, like telling people when their turn comes. And bevakasha, Ed, take it over.
Yes, Diane, you're first, and then followed by Miriam and Etty. Please unmute when you're ready.
Not
Thanks.
me. I should have taken my hand down.
Okay,
Sorry.
Miriam.
Yes, I enjoyed it tremendously. But I wanted to share how Enrico Macias is, for anywhere in the world, or the immigrants, he is so precious. And my experience here in Houston, my boss who is Coptic, Egyptian, and we absolutely bonded over the songs of Enrico Macias. He was an immigrant, I mean, many, many years. And so he speaks to everybody. This is one thing. And very briefly, I couldn't shake off בדרך לעין חרוד, בדרך לעין חרוד, the Amos Canaan Association. So there was anything in it, because I hear בדרך לעין חרוד, it's for me is a dystopic book of
what Miriam is mentioning is the name of a novel, a futuristic novel called On the Road to Ein Harod. Yeah.
Well,
a dystopia.
Yeah, I know it's of course a terrible story there, but no, it's not. Although I was aware, and I borrowed the name just to make some kind of association. I mean, I read the book before I wrote the poem, but nothing of my story in the poem has to do with the Amos Kenan story.
Mm-hmm.
But it's there.
It's there. The presence is there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Eddie, please.
I just want to share something very personal. Sami, each one of your songs, it's like writing my life story. My parents got married in Bet Hashita, which is not far from Ein Harod.
Yeah.
When they got married, my father was told, please change your name because your last name, because it sounds too Arabic. And he had to do it. So another question, another things you mentioned that your parents brought the records of Enrico Macias. I wonder if they also brought records of Salim Halali.
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay.
There
Salim Halali is my uncle. He is
Really?
the brother of my father.
Wow.
And my father had to change his name from Halali to Hileli.
That's a shame.
And
that is so sad. Wow.
And 40 years later, his sister came to Israel to look for my father and couldn't find him all these years. She lived in Akka and my father lived in Haifa, half an hour away. They never could meet because she was looking for Halali and could never imagine that his name would be changed to Hileli. Luckily, they managed to meet only 6 months before he passed away. So yes, never change your last name. You are 100% right. And I am so touched by every word of your songs. Thank you so much.
Well, Salim Halali is a hero of all of us, of course. I'm so honored to meet his nephew, his niece. It's amazing, really.
When he came to give a performance in Israel, unfortunately, it was before Israel was ready to make peace with Israel, before the Oslo time. Unfortunately, we didn't reach this peace yet, but he came to a performance in Israel and he said that peace is the most important things in the Middle East. Unfortunately, people were throwing stuff on the stage, call him anti-Zionist, and he left and he swore never to come back till there will be peace.
Yeah, he was right to do so. I know about the story. I remember the whole thing. Yeah, very sad. He said more than that, of course, but he identified himself always as an Arab by identity and Jewish by religion, and so the ultimate Arab Jew, Salim Halali, and of course he is adored not only by Jews. He's a big star of North Africa. He's bigger than anything I can imagine in music and art in North Africa. There's a movie that was made about him.
And the line that touched me the most is when you said the Jews from Europe, that European were the enemy, is because the sister, the older sister of my father and the singer Salim Halali, was murdered in Auschwitz.
Because she was.
She was taken from a street in Paris and murdered with her 7 months baby. They were deported to Auschwitz and murdered there. So here you have a family that in one hand was asked to change their last name because it sounds too Arabic. And then another part of the family was murdered in Auschwitz.
Etty, it's unbelievable your story and how it connects to what Sami could offer us today. Thank you both so much. Thank you. Ed, who goes next? You're muted. Ed, you're muted.
Elizabeth is
Elizabeth
next.
goes next. Thank you.
First, Sami, I want to tell you how much I loved your poetry. And when you said it all came from your experiences and not fiction, I can understand that. And it was wonderful. And I also want to thank Rachel, because over the many months that I have been coming to poetry classes and book clubs, she has really educated us about the experiences of the Mizrahi Jews when they came to Israel. So, toda rabah.
Thank you.
We had Eli Amir meet the book club a couple of weeks ago. Yeah.
Yocheved.
Yes, thank you very much. It was amazing, Sami, to see you, to hear your voice and your poetry. It is touching, and for me, it's how I met. I came from Australia. I was born in Germany, but I went to live in Israel for a little while. And my first introduction was to the young people of a Moroccan descent. And all the memories came flooding by, just as you spoke about in your poetry. And I think it's been just a ray of sunshine to me, and I'm sure to everyone who's on this program. A lot of life, light, love. And the poetry is so touching and simple and so expressive, and it goes to each and everyone's heart. Thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Yocheved, all the way in Sydney, Australia, Sami.
Wow.
Yocheved is in Australia right now as she is speaking to you. Yeah. Ed, please unmute.
Suzanne, you're next.
I know this has been touched on, but I kept feeling like I was rereading Scapegoat as I listened today. The issues of the parents and grandparents not fitting in, the name changing, the place of music. All of these things were so prominent in that book. And we kept reading, and I kept thinking, oh yeah, I know that. I experienced it in a way from reading and studying that book and listening to Eli Amir. And it was absolutely like you, Rachel, have enriched us so much that we can hear this poetry today and experience this poet and have experienced that book with the author. It's this world that has been open to us is amazing, and I can't thank you enough. And I will also be in Israel at the end of May and June and expect to be in your living room.
Okay, not a problem. You're welcome.
Yes, Sami, I had a question, which is that so many of your poems work in terms of the sound, but you're in film school, yes? So I'm curious about how that relates, because I see film as being so much more focused upon the visual medium, although sounds are obviously important. So I'm curious as to how you sort of cover both of them.
Ed, I will forgive you, but that was the question I planned to ask. Okay, go ahead.
Great question. Well, remember, the full name of our school is the School of Audio and Visual Arts. So we have a department of soundtrack design and music composition for musicians in our school. So there's a whole department doing sound, and I made myself 3 documentary films, and the sound is everything. I remember scenes, whole scenes, not from my movies only, but from others, just by sound. I remember scenes by the sound, the dialogue. All of you remember dialogues from movies. You don't really remember the picture. I mean, you could, but it's never going to be exact. But the sound will always be exact. And I'm not a musician, but I guess it's always ringing in my head, you know. And so in being in a school where the audio, the sound is so central, very central to what we are doing, what the students are doing, is really part. But I never thought of it until you asked the question. So this is interesting. But I say always, I'm a person. I'm a man of words, of words, of letters, and less of images and pictures. And I never touch the camera. When I make a film, I never touch the camera. I have a cameraman. I just design my frame and I don't touch it because, but I do touch the sound recorder because I want to make sure it's working and everything is getting into the sound recorder. So yeah, it's interesting. Just thinking.
One of the other observations on that is that the Jewish tradition, the biblical traditions, were not allowed to make images, right, of God or anything.
Yeah.
No one talked about sound. So I guess you're free to do anything you want with sound. You just have to be careful about the visual images.
Yeah. Bible is full.
Also, the commandment is Shema and not Re'eh.
Yeah. Although there are some amazing visions in the Bible.
That is true.
But it's always, it's full of songs. It's full of songs. I mean, everything comes from there. I mean, everything is also mixing in my writing, in my head. You know, you'll find a line from the prayer book, line from a verse from the Bible, and it's all mixing. I studied some Talmud. I studied as much as I can. So it's all ringing in my head, and I'm not even paying much attention to that. I have to tell you the truth. It's just coming out like that. Yeah.
We have Lynn, and then Rena, Stuart, Deborah, and Ruby. Please, Lynn.
In your poem on the way to Kibbutz Ein Harod, you just said that you were a man of words. So how do you pronounce Ein Harod if you've lost the chet and you've lost the ayin? You've lost the initial letters of the name of the kibbutz. And at the end, when you say, well, I guess I just swallowed it, is that like swallowing your pride?
Well, Ein Harod, that's the name, of course.
I know, but you've lost the ayin, you've lost the initial letter of the name of the kibbutz. Yeah, that's so the irony of it. In order to go there, you need to lose that which is so, you know, rooted in you.
You have to lose your eye. You really to lose your sight, meaning you have to lose your self observation. I mean, you have to blend in and think like the group. I'm not saying others who joined the kibbutz didn't go through the same experience. Either they came from Hungary or from I don't know, from Poland. I'm not saying that. It should be fair to say that one of the pillars of Zionism was really to erase, to negate anything to do with the diaspora. Anything to that's really the main pillar. So getting rid of religion, getting rid of God, if you wish. I'm talking about socialist, secular, atheist Zionism, not talking about religious Zionism later on. And so names, first thing they did, I mean, European Zionists, they changed their own names. They got rid of their name.
Somebody want me to unmute?
Next, after Lynn, Rena.
Can I just add one other thing? There's something Abrahamic in your poem, More Than Voices. Azafti et moladati, azafti et beiti. That's Abraham's Lech Lecha. And he's always conscious of the fact that he's ger v'toshav. That's what he says to Ephron. I'm different, you know, and that's the problem.
But I took that from Komasias because it's in his song.
Gotcha. Okay.
First, of course. I mean, I just followed his lyrics. Je quittais mon pays, je quittais mes maisons.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for your observations.
Thank you, Rena.
Oh, I just wanted to say that an interesting story in regard to the names issue, and that is that my grandfather didn't know enough to change his name back to what it was. At Ellis Island, they put in what they wanted to put in. I think they put in his mother's maiden name because it was easy. But his sons found out that it wasn't his name, the family name. And his sons went and they changed it. And then we found relatives. So it was it was a lovely ending.
Yeah, losing relatives, one of the consequences of changing your last name, as we heard from Eti.
Stuart?
Thank you, Rena. Yeah.
Okay, my parents were first generation English and we lived in London. In 1934, my father was working in London and he changed his name from Sternberg to Stanton, which I have kept. But all my son-in-laws have names which are Germanic, Katzenellenbogen, Baum, Brod. So things have changed.
Okay. Thank you, Stuart, and also for the wonderful reading, as always. Toda rabah.
Deborah.
Sami, thank you. I found you incredibly sensitive, and I want to speak about music, sound versus visual art, which you mentioned. And music or sound is been considered the most abstract form of art because it represents emotional states. And I think that's what you were trying to get at. And if you think of a wonderful film you may have seen, what evokes emotion in that film is the musical score usually. And I'll just tell one little anecdote. My late husband, when he was a very young doctor in Canada, he walked into a ward in a hospital where there are all Down syndrome children in cribs, and they were playing classical music and the children were all conducting. They were out of themselves. So I think music, sound brings you out of yourself. And that's why you have responded to it in the way that you have. And you're incredibly sensitive. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, and also for the gift of music today, which is also about sound. Toda rabah. Thank you.
Ruby, please unmute.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sami. You came once to our synagogue in Somerville, Mass, when you were living in New York, by our member Joel Hochman, who,
Wow.
and you came to our synagogue. We all fell in love with you then. You read your
That was so
poetry.
long time ago. Wow.
It was great. We're waiting for you to move back to the States and bring you in again.
No, we are not.
Well, I go back.
Well, wait a minute. Speak for yourself. So I have a question. And that, well, first of all, a comment that these are the names or something like that in your poem just echoes the Tanakh. These are the names. So, right. So it's dragging, it's bringing centuries behind it in that one line in the poem. It's brilliant. Your poetry is brilliant.
Thank you so much.
A question and another short comment. The question is, there is a book, or maybe it's just an essay, and I don't know if it's the name of it. I tried looking it up, but it's Mizrahi Israeli, and it's something like, I'm one of you. You know, when the police arrest him because of his accent, and he has to say, I'm one.
Yeah, Ana min al Yahud.
Can you put that in the chat?
No, Ruby, please email me and I'll send you the text.
I'll be glad to do that. Thank you.
Email me. I have it in Hebrew, in English.
Wonderful, because I read part of it.
A couple of weeks ago.
It was just amazing. Yeah. And just a comment. When a lot of people from Poland, Jews from Poland, came here, they had a name, various names that were very clearly Polish Jewish. Now we wouldn't know. We wouldn't even know they were Jewish names. But they didn't want to seem Jewish when they got here. So a whole bunch of people changed their names to what they thought was American or non-Jewish or German. They changed their names to Goldstein. So there are a ton of, they tried to avoid being seen as Jewish and raced right into it. So that's just a funny story about name changing. An unfortunate name, because then they lose their whole past of their Jewish names, like Israelis did. You know, Ari Ben Canaan, you know, lost the Hershkovitz, lost even the Cohen, you know, because Cohen is mostly now a Mizrahi name, not an Ashkenazi name. And well, yeah, there's, but certainly all of the Yiddish names and the Ashkenazi names were lost when they took, like Ben Canaan. So what's your genealogy? Well, I don't know. We're done with genealogy. We start here.
Mm-hmm.
So you really speak to all of that. Thank you.
I had once a conversation with a colleague at Queen's College, and well, he asked me many questions. So I always feel I have the right to ask the same questions, because it's not an interview, but he was saying where your family came from, Morocco, and where is that and this, and okay, I was kind enough to answer all the questions. And then I asked him where your family came from to this country. And he said, well, he was a European Jew. He said, we've been here forever. So what do you mean? Are you Native American? And he said, no, but you know, we've been here forever. So, well, why don't you tell me where you came from? And it took him and he was a historian of Jewish studies. So I said, it took him so long to just say, we came from some little remote place between Lithuania and what today is Russia. I said, wow, that was so hard. Well, what's the problem? Between Poland to Russia. Someone said, yeah, because it was a long time ago. We are Americans. So that was very funny, peculiar.
Well, I was in Israel from 70 to 76, and I can't tell you how many times I heard, I'm not a Jew, I'm an Israeli. We're not Jews, we're Israelis.
There is a great story about Amos Oz is telling that story that I don't remember if it was in his kibbutz. No, it was called kibbutz in the 50s, when some American Jews came to tour the country and maybe to help and raise some support and donations, and so they come to the kibbutz. They go to see the cows and the chicken and the fields. Then they come to the Bet Yeladim, which is used to be that the kids are all raised in one place.
Children home, yeah.
Yeah, like chicken home and then children home. So they went together, and he tells the story. And he says they used to tell the guests, "Look at these beautiful, strong children. They don't even look Jewish." So that was his story. And so, because that was the whole point of really creating the new
ideology.
Yeah, the standard of beauty there in the 6 years I was there was blonde and blue-eyed.
Aryan,
like,
you mean.
How did? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Robbie, for raising these very insightful comments.
Thank you so much.
Cynthia.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sami. I love your poetry. It really touched my heart. And I was jumping. You really said a piece of what I wanted to say is that what struck me with that Eila Shemot is there you have the first two words of the book of Shemot. And so it gives it a certain gravitas, a certain heaviness, you know, that there's this biblical connection. And in my own mind, I'm thinking, you know, when we came out of Egypt and we were in that first chapter of Shemot, those names were all listed. They weren't changed. And it just makes me wonder historically what was happening in Israel that it felt such a need to have to change these names. We didn't change them. We kept those names when we went into the book of Shemot. Nobody changed. This were the names. But with your history, the need to have to change and not honor the past, which we've honored the past in all of our Torah. It's just interesting to me.
Yeah, that's why I put it there.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Fran or Ken, or both?
Hi, this is Ken. Thank you, Sami, and the organizers. Well, the poetry we heard dealt with the issues of assimilation and identity, which is a whole nother realm of poetry of Sami's that wasn't touched on. That's the anti-war.
Next week.
So is Sami going to be doing his anti-war poetry?
We will study it without Sami.
Well,
you know what? Give me a break, not here in public. Let me see. But for now, the answer is no, and then give me a break, okay?
You've got a break. Special price.
Let me just say, Ken, and all of you, that I have published 6 books of poetry, and the 7th one is coming, God willing, very soon, like in beginning of March, and I have other kind of poems. One kind is political poetry, which actually the first poems I wrote, the very first poems I wrote, I was 22 years old in a war in Lebanon. It was 1982. And so I think these are the first poems I ever wrote, political, not considering love poems in high school. I mean, the first poems I felt, this is me, this is my voice, were political about that war, about how horrible that war was. And so I have a whole book, just political poetry, whole book. And I have another book, just love poetry. So I wrote lots of love poetry. So depends, depends who invites me to read and where. And sometimes people, sometimes I'm invited to read only political poetry. People ask me to read only those poems. And sometimes I had the pleasure to read only love poems. So
Okay, so we do have, if you received our source sheets, you
Yeah.
know that we included a solid number of Sami's political poetry, but we sort of went with the choices tonight following the music, and it ended up being more this body of poetry. We are planning to address the political anti-war poetry next week, and let me figure out how we are going to do about that. I don't want to go beyond that right now. But thank you for raising the question.
Thank you.
You did it beautifully.
Dorothy?
So I join my voice with everyone else's complimenting our wonderful speaker, our poet today. Thank you so much for bringing all of this to us, Rachel. It really was a wonderful session. I just want to shine a little light on this issue of having the name changed or changing it voluntarily. You know, it's a great sign of pride in when I think of Israeli culture, that the pioneers came in and they threw off their old identity and created a new identity that they were very proud of, as opposed to when people come into a society and their identity is changed for them, as if they have something to be ashamed of instead of proud for. And just one little story from an American perspective. When I went to high school, it was a very, it was a small, sort of special high school for bright kids, bright girls. And they wanted us to be they wanted all of us to be like the Manhattan young woman with perfect speech, beautiful diction, and absolutely not a trace of any Yiddishkeit or dentalization of your words. You had to all speak the same way. And so they plucked out of the classes. I was with one of my friends the other day, we were laughing about it. All of us who had even the tiniest little bit of a Yiddishism in our voices. And we had special speech. We were plucked out to learn how to speak properly. And I remember my uncle said to me one day when I came home, "Why do you have such highfalutin talk all of a sudden?" You know, like, who are you? And who are you is the real question. And when does one establish enough confidence that you can turn around to the society and say, "I am Yankel, and that is my name," or "I am whatever your heritage is," and feel, this is who I am, this is who I identify as. And if you are sophisticated, you will be able to accept me as at least on your level. And I don't mean you personally, I mean the society as a whole.
Yeah.
It's a high bar, it's a very high bar.
Thank you so much for this remark. Of course, I'm aware of that, of course, and I've written about that, not poetry. I wrote maybe more articles than poems. And when I was younger, people didn't like the analogy I made, but I said to erase your own identity and history is suicide, spiritual suicide. To do it to someone else who's helpless and cannot defend himself or herself or themselves is murder. And people didn't like that. When I said I meant spiritual, I didn't mean real killing someone, but
painful. It's damaging.
That was maybe 30 years ago. So I was writing stuff like that. I used to have columns in newspaper, like at least 3 of them. So I wrote many of them. I don't know, hundreds of them. So this is one of them, and created a big buzz. This is before internet, so thank God there were no talkbacks, and just people sending. The editor will say, "Well, we got so many reactions on the fax. You want me to read on fax machine?" This is. So I said, "No, keep it to yourself. I don't want it." So
well, thank you so much for your insights and sharing your beautiful work with us.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Sami, I had 2 fast connected questions. One is, who influenced you in terms of the style, or which poets in sort of particular were you influenced by? And then secondly, were you ever involved in music yourself? As a musician, as a singer, music?
Myself?
Yes.
I'm sorry, you.
Did you lose it? Right. So the first question goes to who were the poets? And then the second one is, were you ever, because you sort of referred to music or within the family, were you ever a musician or singer?
Can hear you.
Did he miss that?
I don't know. I think it's my internet.
Yeah,
the whole thing froze for a
lost
second.
your video. We lost your video.
My video?
We cannot. Now you're back. Okay, now you're back.
I'm back.
Yes.
Oh, you lost me. Okay, so probably.
Yeah.
So you asked me poets who influenced my writing and musicians who influenced my music.
No, you yourself as a musician. Have you ever done music?
I'm not a musician. I said so. I'm not a musician. Yeah, I like music very much. Two sons are musicians. I don't know where they got it from, but I'm a musician. Well, as far as poets, there's so many of them. I mean, I think the first I've written, you can look it up. I've written an article about Bialik. Bialik. It's the first really, not even poems, the first songs we sang in kindergarten as a new immigrant from Morocco, or of Bialik's, of course, children songs. And I fell in love with the language, and then later on with everything he's written. And I fell in love with the language of poetry. I'm not saying Hebrew, but really the poetry itself. It was amazing for me how you can create an entire world that is only yours, and it's like nobody else's. It's like one poem cannot be repeated, which was amazing. And then later on, I read, of course, more and more, but it took some time until I could identify with the voice. Because when you write, you're looking for a voice that could be yours, or a voice you could feel comfortable in. And I think it was 1977, I think, when Erez Biton, you should have him on your class, or you did maybe.
We studied 2 sessions, not with him, but we studied 2 sessions of his poetry.
Erez Biton published his first poetry book, Mincha Marokkait, a Moroccan offering, when I was 17. And my father had the habit to buy any book that the author would be Moroccan or Mizrahi or anything. He just bring it home and we have to look at it. He didn't care what is it. History, could be poetry, prose, whatever. So he brought this and he says, what do you think? And I opened, and this is the first time ever in Israeli poetry, not only for me as an experience, but of course my experience, to open a poem and then start reading, and then there are words in Moroccan Arabic inside the text. And I thought, wow, this guy is crazy or something. And I kept reading, and his mother brought the village from Morocco on her back, and this was so exciting. It was so, and I kept it like very close, and I never took it outside of the home, because I thought this is probably something was published underground or something, and it was different than anything I read in school ever. And telling the story of a Moroccan wedding and describing every little salad, and he was blind. And I thought I found my voice, at least that kind of, that part.
Yeah, I was sort of
my
thinking,
voice.
hoping that you would say Erez Biton when Ed asked you the question. I was sort of wishing
we
for
have
that.
Long going relationship. I made a documentary film about him.
You
also.
did?
Yeah. A very nice one with good music. And
Does it have English subtitles?
Huh?
Does it have English subtitles?
Yes, of course. I can send you.
Will you send me? Yeah, please.
Yes. And Erez Biton, but then I started reading other stuff, I went to university, the Hebrew University, Jerusalem, and then there were some writers, Miri Ben Simchon and Roni Somek in the beginning, and others, Elias, and I was reading and said, wow, this guy is really telling my story, this is amazing. And so I was so excited. But then, of course, I was reading others, like American stuff, and especially Afro-American poets like Langston Hughes and Maya Angelou and Amiri Baraka, and I said, wow, my mind was blown. These people are just wow. And these are my influences, basically, of course. And many that came along, So I'm even inspired by very young people who tell me that I was their inspiration. I read your poem and I'm so inspired, I want to write something. And they laugh about it because they're like 30 years younger than me. And they say, we grew up on your poetry. I said, well, that's crazy.
Jan?
Thank you. This is a very long 15-minute, Sami, that you agreed to stay on. I want to tell you that your term spiritual murder really hit me in the heart. My grandfathers came to this country, they changed their names, and I've tried to do family history and I cannot do it because they changed the names in such a way. I have no idea what the names were before. And I feel so cheated and so lost that I don't know about my family. But your term, spiritual murder, really, I identify with that today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you.
Mona.
So I want to echo what others have said. How much, Sami, I love your poetry and how grateful I am to you, Rachel, for bringing Sami and so many other voices to us. I also want to echo sort of what we've been talking about, which is really identity. What's in a name, right? But it's really the whole, it's the sounds, it's the smells, it's the names. My maiden name was DeKoven, capital D-E, capital K-O-V-E-N. Very fancy schmancy, and everyone thought I was Dutch royalty. And in fact, we were Jewish Russian from Duchovna. That was the name in Russia. And my father's cousin who brought everybody over, Dr. DeKoven, made the name DeKoven. I have always felt free as an American liberal Jew, observant liberal Jew, to choose my own identity, to play with the edges, to play with and take on and try on. And I think that and then the question of loyalty to the past and what am I passing on to my children? The question of the spiritual murder and the image of you holding Biton's book, like it's contraband, like it's illegal, but it's you, it's touching your chest, right? There's something about the affirmation and the de-affirmation, the disconfirmation of who you are. Martin Buber talked about how we all are looking for confirmation from others. And the disconfirmation, and I understand that in his early Israeli society, there was this desire to create something new. And it was a choice for many people to disregard the past, and particularly the Holocaust. And then in that context, Mizrahi Jews got sort of herded into a certain orientation that really was spiritual murder. The question of how much we change, that's our own choice versus what's done to us. I think is a major, major issue. And I've learned so much about that from Eli Amir's work, from your work, and from all we're reading. And I just feel like, again, like other people have said, just opened up in this process. I'm very grateful and grateful. I love your poetry.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed, how are we doing? Let us check.
You have all been doing well, but I think is it getting late there? It's not so late here in the East Coast.
I know, but it's getting later by us, you know?
Yeah.
It's very late. I mean, we are after 11 p.m. And I was just checking to see if there are any other hands, maybe, you know, like physical hands, people who do not use the digital. So let me.
We just have
Josefa,
two who raised.
We have Josefa and Martin.
Josefa and then Martin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and with that, we will conclude. Okay. Yeah.
Just as they changed names for people from Romania too. In my family, my sister Bella became Yafa. My father Dinu became David. Maybe it was his name also before. My mother Anna became Hannah. I was Josefina, became Josefa. My aunt Sarah became Sophie, became Sarah, and on and on.
Yeah.
And Enrico, and another thing, Enrico Macias was in Yerushalayim. I saw him in Yerushalayim in Binyanei Umot not long ago. I think about 15 years ago, not longer than this, and he was still great.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know where you are. I can see. It's a kef לקרוא את השירים שלך. It's fun to read your poem. Yeah.
Thank you. I just have to mention that the only Ashkenazim we knew in Ashdod growing up are Jews from Romania.
I know.
Yeah. We shared the destiny, of course, and they were the minority, so they had to learn Moroccan, they had to learn French, and so they could get around.
Right.
You know.
Yes.
One of them went to school with me, elementary school, became very famous. His name was Ilan Goldstein. Now is Ilan Galon. He was a member of the Knesset and very famous. So we grew up together. His Moroccan Arabic is better than mine. I saw him speak to an old lady once in Ashdod. We were going somewhere and I was amazed, and because he picked it up and they had to survive.
Yeah. Thank you.
Best friends.
Thank you, Josefa. Toda rabba.
Martin?
Yes, I'm thinking of two things. In Bereshit, we have the example of our forefathers changing their names when they had physical dislocations or spiritual changes. And against that, we have the example of the holiness or the importance of the name, even saying that God is, Hashem. So I'm wondering, Sami, as you experience the personal loss of part of your identity with the underlying assumption that your culture was inferior to the culture that Israel was trying to evolve to, do you have any different feeling if you look back on a cultural or national level, whether that was the right thing to do?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't the right thing to do at all. And the reality today proves that, because today you cannot imagine this place without Arab sounds and music and scents and colors and poetry. I mean, reality proves that was the wrong way. The so-called melting pot, which is false, of course, the same in America. There's no melting pot. There is me melting you in the image of myself. There's no... it's just false for to blend immigrants to serve society and values that, of course, the hegemony decides about. So reality proves that now you can have solidarity between Israelis and still celebrate differences and celebrate this beautiful mosaic of cultures and music, and we are not ashamed anymore. The opposite. Today we can say Mizrahi poetry. And many people will fall into that category very proudly. We can say Mizrahi filmmaking. We teach it even as such, like as in America, we teach Afro-American literature and Afro-American filmmaking, etc., etc. So it became like this since the 90s, but it became after a struggle of the second generation, or maybe second and a half, which is my generation, still going, but reality is different than the vision. And the vision was very boring. I always say to my colleagues when we argue about this, it would imagine if that was a success. It would be such a boring place to live in. Homogenic, one color, khaki color, you know, and just as a metaphor. Of course, there are many issues, there are many problems. So the big argument is what do we do with the core curriculum? That's the big argument. I've written a whole book just about that. What do? You respect everybody, and they'll be respected in the classroom, and they'll respect you back, and they'll be very happy. It's not only that I grew up not being taught, even this generation, not being taught anything about my ancestors, not just ancestors, just my grandfather. Not only I'm losing that heritage, but everybody is losing. So we teach nothing, but really zero. So you can check me, because I went through all textbooks the last 70 years. We teach nothing about ultra-Orthodox Jews, what we call Haredim. Nothing in the textbooks. I'm talking about, of course, the Israeli public schools. Nothing in the textbooks, nothing in the classroom. And no wonder we talk to them like the last anti-Semite in Europe when we talk about them. How parasites they are, they don't contribute, they don't do anything, they just impose themselves, they just because all we teach about those Jews is in the news and today in the social media. So this is just one example. We don't teach anything about the Arabs. 1.7 million living in Israel. Nothing, really. We teach until 48, how we beat them, and that's it. And we are so democratic, we granted them a citizenship, and now everybody's happy. But we know nothing about them. We just see them in the news. Them in the hospitals, because most of doctors and nurses. So we don't teach anything. We just teach one narrative, one story, one history, which is the story of European Zionists, or even to be more precise, Eastern European history, and one literature, and we still live there. I'll tell you just one last anecdote. I'm leading a very nice initiative now in our school, a workshop. International. It's not international. It's a joint workshop between our students and students from Morocco. So we've been studying for the last month, of course on Zoom, online, and we're going to meet in March in Morocco. But now we've been studying twice a week about the history of the Jews of Morocco. So the Moroccans are Muslim students, all of them, and our students are Jewish. But I told them from the very beginning, and we have at least 4 or 5 from Moroccan families in our group. It wasn't a demand, but it just happened. And I told them, all of you, Moroccan Muslims and Israeli Jews, know nothing about Moroccan Judaism. nothing. So you start. So the Moroccans were surprised. I mean, they don't teach it in our schools. So no, you know, the Israelis know nothing. It's not in your textbooks. It's not in our textbooks. So you all start from zero. Don't feel bad. You're all learning from the very, very beginning. And they're going to go there and they're going to make 4 documentary films about the Jews and the Jewish community of Marrakesh, to spread that in both schools in Morocco and schools in Israel. And this is very exciting. It's happening like every day, very intensive.
Wow, Sami. Okay.
That's the thing. The Israelis will teach
them. Thank you so much for this last anecdote and everything from the very beginning of this session, and even from the very beginning of us talking together on WhatsApp and emails and preparing this session. It was a sheer pleasure even to research and work with you, and your help with getting the text and the translations. Unbelievable. Ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Rachel.
Sami, I really enjoyed everything. Last night I was reading everything and your book, and I really related to you. It was funny that I live in the Ashkenaz area, and my name is Levy. So we used to make fun that we changed it to Leibovich. Oh, Ashkenazi, like you change it here. And I love it. Really, I enjoy it so very much. Thank you so much. And thank you, Rachel, and Shabbat Shalom to all of you. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Of course,
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Shalom, Rachel. Thank you for a lovely evening, and thank you, Sami, for your poetry.
Hey, thank you both. I will be in touch tomorrow. It's too late for tonight.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Thank you, Sami. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom to all.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
And stay healthy.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Sami.
Rav Todot.
Toda rabba.